So today I'm going to be talking about simplifying mobile development. This is sort of a kind of cross-platform talk, mostly about mobile. And I'm an architect, and I've been working in mobile for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And I've set up this company called Make Apps Better, which I'll be introducing as part of this presentation. Okay, so I've sort of mentioned my sort of role there. The story is, from the company perspective, is applying the experience I've sort of gathered over the last few years and sort of seeing where the problems are in the industry and sort of starting to solve those problems. And so, yeah, let's cover some of the problems we've no doubt come across. This is endemic to sort of all apps, and we're here to talk about how we can solve those in new and interesting ways. So the biggest sort of pronounced problem in mobile is cost. It's not just the development time, which is arguably a lot more expensive than web, because you've got so much more sort of fragmentation, specialist skill sets, but it's the cost of the time required to sort of as on top. So this would include stuff like App Store submission, review process. All this sort of adds to mobile being an extremely expensive domain. This is sort of angled more at the sort of Android community, but the efforts to support fragmentation in the Android community is very complicated. There's a growing graph of different shaped devices, and I ask, are current approaches solving those problems in cost-effective ways? And reuse. I've seen over the years lots of attempts at reuse. So reuse will be a theme of this presentation. There's a few ways which you can exploit reuse. Mostly it's to avoid maintaining two separate code bases for similar apps, which is the worst case reuse. And I find often that attempts at reuse can further complicate rather than simplify. So that's one thing here which we're really going to address. I did mention App Store earlier, but there's, from a different perspective, there's a sort of a time delay in terms of customer refreshing. So sure, you can put apps in the App Store and that'll take a couple of days to happen, but there are some quite dangerous statistics about whether or not users on older phones actually update at all. One client I was working with, they've got 300,000 users, and after 2 weeks, only 10% have updated. Now, obviously, the latest Android and iOS versions address these issues, but there's still a huge proportion of users on the older versions, and there are restrictions to the auto-updating. And the theme of this presentation is also about being sort of at runtime, being dynamic. So there will always be a slowdown in regards to the App Store. What are the ways around that? So the approach I'm sort of emphasizing is runtime styling, which is a sort of it's new and exciting. There's not really a precedent for it in mobile development before this year, and now it's an opportunity to explore that with you. So I'll talk through a few more of the benefits, and we'll show a demo and then recap what we've learned. So the biggest benefit of runtime styling is the ability to make quick changes. Now, if you think back to the sort of traditional mobile development, it's a slow process. The end results have to be emulated and in a very slow development cycle. And the second emphasis here is there's no app store for runtime styling changes. It's just straight down to the device instant. So the runtime styling solution I'm sort of pushing today is a native CSS, and that's something that the company Make Apps Better sort of supports and provides, and that's what we'll be seeing in the demo. So I've included this slide here to sort of emphasize that the installation is typically one line, and I'll show you that one line shortly. So now we'll go to the demo. I've pre-recorded the demo to make it a lot less stressful for me. Now I'll keep it on this view. So, for those not familiar with Android development, we've got a standard IntelliJ editor on the left, and we've got a standard Android emulator on the right. So I'm going to emphasize that with the mouse pointing again. And the structure of apps are generally divided in two files, form XML on the left there, and an activity file, a sort of a kind of code file in Java. So if we quickly look in the Java file, you can see that I've edited the onCreate method, which is the starting point for all Android apps. And lower down here, you can see that there are 2 lines to install. Now, I mean, I could put that on one line, but that's sort of it would reduce readability. Let's put it like that. So important things to take notice here is, so for runtime styling, what do you want? You want the ability to load the styles from a local file and the ability to refresh those remotely. So I'm just going to whiz back there. The ability to load those remotely. On the style CSS here is a file included up in the assets folder. We're using sort of CSS here to do the runtime styling, which is sort of a web standard, and there's no need to sort of reskill or train people up. CSS is very intuitive, a styling language. So we load the CSS from a local file. This is good for your first starts and offline use. And then it will load from a local URL. So this is on my machine running every second. Now, how you load style CSS from your assets folder, you can run this very simple command here, which I've put in the documentation, which turns that folder into a local web server. So you can just quickly load the styles.css. As you'll see in a second, this will enable live editing, so it's very easy to just change the CSS and see it update in the app, which is what we're all here to see. So if we have a look in the form XML, this is the structure of the app. You can see I've got 2 very simple IDs here on the left, a form and an email ID. These correspond to the things on the right there, which is inside the app. So we've got the email field. Now, I've chosen and emphasizing these IDs because we'll refer to them later in the CSS. So as you can see, we're now going to look at the style CSS file, which we're pulling in. So this is being loaded into the app every second. Let's start making some changes. So what I've done there is change all the inputs, which is standard HTML and standard CSS, and set them to have a red background. If you spotted that, update the app instantly. And this is sort of emphasizing the live editing aspect. So you can just keep changing this file and you don't have to restart the emulator. This is really exciting stuff because ask any Android developer and they will expect you to have restarted the app for that, adding sort of, it will add up during the day all this extra time. So let's put a bit of a real world scenario on this. We have this login screen on the right, but we want to reuse it more. So we've got our architect's sort of hats on, and we're thinking, how can we reuse this login screen in every app we make? Now, I work in commerce, and I've drafted up a Topman brand here. Now, have you spotted? I just pasted that in, hit save, and instantly updated in the app. You can use this on the fly to style your login screens for each of your brands. So if we have a quick scan, we've got the hash view is a sort of ID on the right. I'm pulling in the Topman image remotely. And halfway down here, we've got our email and password IDs, which we saw defined in the XML before. And these set quite a lot of styling preferences, all of which are very simple to sort of research and reference. This is standard. And right down at the bottom, we're referencing the sort of the login button here and changing the background color, say, to add a sort of brand hint. So the reuse really kicks in is when you start working on sister brands. Now, I've worked for sort of the Topshop app, and they were very interested in the ability to paste in the Topshop brand on top, because sister brands share a lot of sort of aesthetics, such as sort of spacing. I mean, there's lots to a style, but the Arcadia group are particularly keen on spacing. So we sort of see here there's sort of the standard style are being applied again. It's similar styling, so you can, if you're working with lots of similar brands, you can sort of define a standard CSS file and tweak a few of the brand highlights here, such as the logo, such as the button color. And you can start to think to yourself, if I wanted to reuse the same app between Topshop and Topman, and all I have to do is change a button color and an image, that's a really exciting thing from an architecture perspective. So next, we'll choose a little bit more of a real-world example, and this is the Evernote styling. Now, the Evernote styling here is very advanced, as you can see by the sort of 6 lines of background positioning. I'm just going to emphasize some of the advanced styling. So this bar at the top with the logo, that's a textured bar, and that's loaded in dynamically. So that's nothing to do with the OS. I'll just put that in there using this CSS. There's also a drop shadow here you might not have spotted. That's pulled in using the CSS as well. So let's just see, let's explore the CSS file a little bit more. You've got there's an iOS sort of specific sort of prefix here, and we can see what it looks like in other devices. So I'm pulling up the iPhone version on the left, a tablet version in the middle, and the standard Android emulator on the right. So this is obviously a cross-platform tool, so we expect the same CSS to look the same on all devices. Now I'm going to quickly rearrange the view and explore the CSS. So the first thing we sort of cover off is the sort of shadow, which I mentioned earlier. This is standard CSS in that you can have many background images. So then we load in the Evernote logo, and finally we load in the header bar, which is sort of the background color. As I mentioned before, the iOS prefix applies to iOS only, so we needed to do a bit of iOS specific stuff. Now this is addressing fragmentation. So the tablet emulator on the right here has a fundamentally different structure to the other views, and we want to be able to specify our CSS for this. So if you're a web developer, you'll recognize a media query. This is just this extra little prefix here to say, if my device has more than 600 pixels, use this styling. So just to sort of show that I'm targeting this specifically, I'm just going to move move the view around a bit here, just to show that it is only affecting one of the views. Now you can imagine a real-world scenario for this where one specific screen resolution doesn't work. Now, this is quite a smart way of doing Android fragmentation, because traditional approaches require you to know the screen resolution exactly and provide an XML structure based on that screen resolution. What I say, and what the web community is known for a long time, is that you want to start specifying ranges. Don't ask for a phone model number and work out its resolution. Work with what you've got. You be responsive and say, right, your screen is 600 pixels, look like this. 700 pixels, look like this. So it's a simplification in cross-device styling. And of course, you can change the colors across the board. So if we just want to change them all to grey, hey presto, they've changed. Cool. So that's the demo. And if you've got any questions on that, it might be a good opportunity to answer the demo questions at the end. So now I'm going to go back to the slide deck. And we'll just cover off a little bit what we've seen there and sort of make sure we're understanding what we just saw. So how it works, the way we deliver runtime styling is using CSS. We use CSS because it's standard, and frankly, the current platform's approach to styling is obscure and confusing. The CSS is interpreted at runtime. That's using some code we've written. CSS parser, if you're interested in that side of things. And then when your app is being run, we detect any changes in your app and apply styling at runtime, matching the CSS which you've input. So we've got a few use cases here which I'm going to sort of reiterate. There's the platform approach. So we had our login screen and we said, okay, I want the same login screen for all my customers. But I want to change the branding for all my customers so they get not only the benefit of the code being well maintained, but also branding is separate. So traditional approaches would require you to have 10 different apps with sort of separated code bases. And I say, no, have one code base, but 10 different branded CSS files. The sort of personalization approach is unlocked with CSS styling. So an example on this is you are an IM client for an enterprise. A customer logs in with the Vodafone email address. When they log in with their Vodafone email address to your enterprise app, they expect it to look like a Vodafone app. But instead they get a very sort of generic, inoffensive branding. So the solution here is to say, when you log into an enterprise app with a specific email, you can use runtime styling to take that email and match it to a brand. So when you do a login, your CMS will say, this user is allowed and they have this branding applied to their profile. So then when the Vodafone user logs in, they see the app branded as if it were a Vodafone app. So that will be working on some of the styling we've just seen. So it will have colored backgrounds, logos at the top, appropriate drop shadows. And this is unlocked through runtime styling and sort of an appropriate server integration. The native CSS is free and it's supported by Make Apps Better. We recommend that for professional use. Discussing particular use cases around integration and sort of appropriateness for a problem would fall under professional services, which we also offer. And thank you for listening. My name is Peter Nash. Please send me an email at this account and follow us on Twitter. I'm now going to have a look and see if there's any questions coming in. Okay, I've got 2 questions which have come in. I'm not quite sure how this webinar software works, so I'll just sort of vocalize it. Oh, hang on, you can see you can see them because I'm showing my screen. So Paul asks, how long does it take to put this into an app? We've covered this in the demo. So if I quickly go back to that, that's PowerPoint. So that is as long as it takes to put in those 2 lines. Now, for your usual development environment, you would have you would have to put in the style CSS as well. So there's a couple of lines and sort of putting in the asset file. So not long at all. What about Windows 8 support as part of a roadmap? That is an interesting question. The Windows 8, I think, as far as we can see, is a sort of growing market. So as part of our roadmap, that's sort of as of yet undetermined. What I will do is discuss with my partner, Nicholas, and send you an email afterwards and sort of seeing where we can take this. The other questions I typically get are around sort of Android installation versions. So it's Android version 10, but there's a nicer installation which you see here, which is Android sort of 14. So we do support Gingerbread, but it's not as neat. Okay, well, thanks very much